Welcome to the Black Etc. podcast, a podcast about how ideas and culture spread amongst Black Americans, especially outside mass media. I'm your host, Ian Youssef. My guest today is Cam James. He's a filmmaker, musician, professional YouTuber, and a rising star in Black political media and political media in general. He's made a name for himself, exposing a lot of scams in our society, with a special emphasis on ones that are attractive to and targeting Black folks. We had a really rich and engaging conversation about those scams and the role that scamming plays in America, both historically and currently. I initially scheduled Cam's episode for a little later, but I decided to push it up. He recently had interviews with Senator Mark Kelly and California Governor Gavin Newsom, and he also played a prominent role in interviewing Dr. Henry Louis Gates for his PBS series on the relationship between Black and Jewish Americans. And his role in that is really why I pushed the episode up and wanted it to come after Dr. Jared Ball's episode. So after Cam released his interview for the PBS series with Dr. Gates, he received a lot of pushback from his followers because the interview was not tough enough. They thought he let the interview subjects slide on the question of the war in Gaza. One of the prominent critics online was Dr. Jared Ball, who released a video critiquing Cam's interview performance. This could have been a beef. This could have been not handled well. They could have antagonized each other and made enemies of each other, but that's not what happened. Cam, to his credit, did a mea culpa, said, you know what, you're right. I wasn't tough enough. I didn't have all the relevant information, and I think they used me and my status amongst younger, Black, politically minded YouTube fans against me for what amounted to, in his mind, a propaganda effort, and that did not sit right with Cam. Also, Dr. Jared Ball invited him for a discussion. The two of them sat down, had a really great discussion about the interview, about Cam's role, and about good-natured disagreement between Black people with different ideas about how things should go in a political space. I thought it was a really good model, seeing the two of them come together, particularly in a public forum, and I commend both of them for that discussion. And beyond that, I do see Dr. Jared Ball and Cam James as working on a similar project, that is, critique of the ideology that Black business, Black capitalism, is the cure to everything that ails the Black community in this country. Having spoken to both of them and having a pretty good knowledge of both of their work, I know for a fact that they are not anti-Black business, they're not anti-Black enterprise, they're not anti-Black entrepreneurship. They're against using Black folks' desperation to sell them a bill of goods that those things will save Black people. In Dr. Ball's case, he has a certain radical solution, while Cam views his role as just pulling the wool off of people's eyes to show how the Black scammers operate and are not working in the best interests of our community. I enjoyed the episode. In the future, I might do more of this, releasing episodes back to back as a thematic pair. We'll see how it goes. And I hope you enjoy the discussion. Today I'm joined by Cam James, musician, filmmaker, educator, professional YouTuber, amongst other things. He does investigative video essays on various scams, but also on the legal ways that the rich and powerful, or those aspiring to be rich and powerful, get over on the rest of us. Welcome, Cam. Thanks for joining me today.
Appreciate that intro, and thanks for having me.
I am struck by the variety of your videos. You alert people to small-time local scams like credit card readers, skimmers. You also have videos on Fortune 500 companies, Project 2025, and people with the highest seats of power in our country. You have videos on cults, on fraternity hazing, various religious, ideological, or otherwise belief systems. What is the through line between all of these?
I'd say if I had to put a name to it, it's acting as a voice for the groups within the Black community specifically that are targeted the heaviest by the powers that be, whether those powers be political groups, the religious groups, all the groups you just named. It doesn't matter who the target is, as long as they're having an adverse impact on these groups that I seek to protect in my life and in my community, then they're fair game.
You have a recurring series of videos about black scammers called FUBU scammers. Why create this series, and what is it about black scams that stood out to you?
For one, I was seeking to fill a void that I identified on YouTube. And that void is multifaceted in that it's not just that black scammers weren't being discussed already. That's not true. JT the Pocket Watcher, who's a pretty large YouTube creator who is actually one of the first people, the first person to co-sign my video series and help it reach a larger audience. He was already exposing black scammers, but nobody was filling a void of bringing cinematic video production to video essays in the black space and filming outside, filming with a reporter type of journalistic style. I saw none of that. I saw some of it on the white YouTube creator side of things. And so it's like trying to identify, how do I fit? What unique thing am I bringing to YouTube that nobody else is doing, which will help me amass an audience in the first place? But also, like, what's my mission? How am I going to get my message across in a way that's entertaining and engaging for wider audiences? And this is what I identified as a way to do so. But black scammers particularly stood out to me as something that I was equipped to tackle based on my life experience. I don't like talking about things that I don't have any experience in, or talking about things that I haven't researched fully. And it made the most sense for me to start from what's closest to home. And it just grew into something that I realized had unlimited potential, in that there's just so many of us aspiring to be like the white scammers in society, to be like the powerful politicians in society that are using conflicts of interest to take money from our communities and oppress us further. So, of all the things I can talk about, it makes me the most angry that people who look just like me, who have, in many cases, started from more humble backgrounds even than I did, are weaponizing their experience of being black, of having this community, against us and using it to drain the resources that we already don't have enough of, to put it shortly.
Right on. I'm glad that you mentioned the production value of your videos. Your subject matter and your scripts are really top notch, but in my opinion, I think the production value and editing is a big reason why you're so popular. So I'm glad you mentioned that there.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You started out as a musician. You're still a musician. How did you find yourself becoming a short filmmaker? And again, how did this exposing scams become your lane?
It's a pretty natural progression. As a musician, I was very ambitious with my music videos, and I wanted to make them myself because working with director after director, not that they're not talented, but one, it costs a lot to hire people, and I didn't have that money. But also, they're never going to quite nail your vision and get things across the way you want them to get across. So I picked up a camera for the first time. Ex-girlfriend gave me a just small like photography camera, the first ever camera I owned. And I progressively, as my demands and ambitions got higher and higher, trying to match major artists, I just sought out larger cameras. So moved to a DSLR, moved to a cinema camera that I'm operating with now. And it's just like I had a vision and I knew how to get there. And I needed to teach myself these things in order to get there. And so I fell in love with film to the same extent that I fell in love with music. And I started to work in client work, doing event recaps, videography services, all that, while also doing musician work, writing songs for people, stuff like that on that side. And I had these parallel tracks alongside my corporate career that I was doing after work hours every single day, devoting that time to creative work. So it just kind of became a natural development for me to get all the skills that I needed to be a compelling filmmaker. And then over time, I felt a desire to use my film skills for something that didn't necessarily just feed me and just elevate me and make me money. So I got behind the camera and I started making small little mini documentaries for friends of mine in this series called Storyline that nobody watched. And it was right before Deep Dives started. And from there, I was like, okay, I did that. I made a full season of that. It was like 7 episodes, little mini featurettes for friends and collaborators of mine, and put those on YouTube. Not many viewers, And I decided to get in front of the camera to deliver my own kind of stories. And at first, those didn't have a lot of traffic either. It was part of the storyline series. And the first episode of Deep Dives was born when I spotted that void. I realized I wanted to talk about more than just my own personal stories. And I attacked Black owned multi-level marketing companies in that first ever episode and stood up outside with a microphone in my hand and in my apartment complex, actually, and just delivered a script for the first time ever. And luckily for me, JT caught wind of it, the larger community on YouTube caught wind of it, and it went viral. And I just kept it going from there.
One thing I appreciate about your work is that you don't look down on the victims of scams. You don't call them stupid. You highlight that it's a product of desperation and lack of knowledge about the scams. And I also appreciate that you don't lean into anti-blackness. A lot of times when we're talking about black scamming, it's a lot of black pathology. It's a lot of black people are so stupid. Black people are gullible. We're the only people who do X, Y, Z. And that's clearly not the case. Why is it important for you to approach it in that way?
First and foremost, start from the fact that I've been victimized by scams myself, as most people have, right? And whether large or small, when you're victimized by a scam yourself, you learn empathy and just have a clearer vision for how these things can impact you, the angles they can approach from when they impact you, the different ways they can look, and the fact that being taken advantage of by a scam or something similar does not make you stupid. These are different things. You don't need to be unintelligent to be a victim of a scam. In fact, I think the arrogance that comes along with thinking that you can't be scammed is what actually gets a lot of people scammed in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be humble in order to actually be scam proof as a person. In order to not fall for these things, you have to soak up the knowledge and see all the ways they can take shape, because scams are executed by people more clever than you are, more intelligent than you are, and people who study human behavior and find gaps in the ways we communicate, in the ways we move, in the ways we transmit money and information, and they take advantage of that. And so once you learn how clever the scam creators truly are, it becomes, a simple matter of fact that you need to be humble yourself and not look down on those who are victims, because most of us are going to be victimized by some kind of scam at least a couple of times in our lives.
Mm-hmm. Our current age, in many ways, is defined by the scammer ethos, right? Get the bag at all costs.
Mm-hmm.
Politicians and corporations have leaned all the way into corruption and opposing regulation and any kind of standards at the expense of the people. Do you think there's a relationship between the scamming culture at large and scamming on the ground?
Oh, 100%. I think there's a straight line. And I point to the president as, scammer in chief, and all the politicians underneath him, all the cabinet members he's appointed. The fact that we live in a country, in America at least, that is extremely scammer centric, that bends regulations and rules regularly and provides lack of regulation and provides policies that enable scamming on such a large scale and to such a large degree, I think is emblematic of what happens as it trickles down to everyone who isn't a politician, who is on more of a street level scam status, and people who are in companies who are probably mid-level scammers. It's all informed by how this country is operated. It's always been scam central. We scammed people out of their land to start this country, and we scammed people who look like me from other continents to provide free labor for centuries to build this country. And so if we're going to go back to the source of it, it's the identity of this country to scam and get the bag at any cost whatsoever. And that was given to us by Europeans. Like, we can keep going back forever, but colonialism and capitalism birth scamming. There's a straight line between them, and you can't divorce those things from each other. So as long as we live in a country that is driven by those things and founded by those things, scams will always continue to morph and evolve and grow And periods like the pandemic will make them more prominent in our social conversation and more aggressive. Every time people are struggling, scams thrive. That's what we've seen in history, and that's what we've seen in recent history in America specifically. So I think it's a straight line from top to bottom on what births this ethos and what continues to make it so prevalent.
Looking at some of the specific types of scams you've covered, MLMs, financial literacy scams, investment scams, crypto, etc. Are there any real substantive differences between them, or are they all just get rich quick schemes at heart?
I think there's substantive differences only in execution. The intention might as well be the same. They're trying to make money. The difference is the level of shame, the level of subtlety, and the targets, right? Sometimes, in the case of I covered who I call the sensei of grifters, Myron Golden, and essentially he's not directly a scammer himself, but he enables scammers. He's giving business owners the tools to use psychological manipulation and high pressure sales tactics on everyday people. And that's exactly what they've done. And so his scheme, I would call it more so than a scam, differs materially from the actual scams that some of his students have run and the actual scams that some of my other targets have run. They look different, they take different shapes, they have different targets, but at the end of the day, the people on the bottom of whether it be a pyramid in a multi-level marketing company, aka pyramid scheme, or whether it be the people on the bottom of these street level scams that take advantage of people's desperation over crypto, whatever it is, the people on the bottom get hurt the most. And that, what I would say, is the through line between all of them.
Mm. Can you give me examples of the ways the scams spread differently based on the type and level of scam? So, like the vehicles, online versus in person. I'm
Mm.
just looking for the different ways that they spread.
Yeah, well, you talked about one of them. Online versus in person is a big difference because what the internet has done is allowed everything to travel faster and everything to be executed at a larger scale with larger potency and much, much faster. So everything that's been taking place on the internet with crypto has allowed people to scam masses of people for millions of dollars at once. And that was not really ever possible before, unless you were in a massive Ponzi scheme. But that, in and of itself, that takes months or years to pull off. So there's never been such a rapid deployment of scams until the internet came into the picture. But with in-person things, you're able to build up that sense of community much more, that in-person handshaking and community building and camaraderie that can only the in-person aspect, in my opinion, can drive such a devoted following and fan base that allows you to scam people slowly over years and years and years of time. And that's still going with creators like, I haven't even fully investigated 19 Keys yet, so I'm not going to directly call him a scammer, but he holds in-person events in addition to his online resources and courses and all these things that he sells in order to make sure he's driving that devotion. You can't drive intense devotion without some kind of in-person aspect to what you do. You have to be able to stand in front of crowds and deliver your message or deliver it via TV appearances, whether live audience or not. You have to have something that allows you to do outreach at scale, but also on a personal level. And so that's a couple of the different ways it can look that affects how fast it moves and how effective it is.
Mm. What topic has elicited the most pushback and vitriol?
uh, Great question. I would say my takedown of Tariq Nasheed and the FBA
Mm.
by far. They took it very personally that I came for their informal leader and the rest of their movement. And they not only attacked me in that video, but they followed me and they still occasionally pop back up hurling insults. So it would have to be them, even more so than the religious fundamentalist groups.
Mm.
They're much more. angry and much more persistent in their criticism.
Wow, that's wild. I wouldn't have expected
Oh yeah,
that.
yeah, they're by far the worst.
I'm sure that a lot of scams overlap, so there's probably some Venn diagrams amongst them. What
Hmm.
has been the most surprising connections or overlap between these scams that you thought were separate?
Um, that's a good question. I think just the fact that one scam can use another scam as the vehicle for scamming people. Like when you talk about crypto, which is in and of itself, for the most part, scams, you take that and you compare it with like the MLM I talked about in my first ever video, which was iBoomerang. It was led by Holden Buggs. It's a multi-level marketing company, and the multi-level marketing company structure itself is a scam. And so adding that onto crypto as a product is something that you can't really fathom until you see it. And it happens a lot where one scam will be co-opted by another scam that's like the entire structure of the business is a scam. And then they use a scam product to sucker as many people as possible and keep their overhead as low as possible, because these products are easy to produce, they're cheap, and they claim to have massive efficacy in their results, like flat tummy tea and waist trainers and all this these garbage products that don't actually give you any benefit but can lie all day about what they proclaim to do. So you see a lot of that with MLMs specifically. You see a lot of it with organizations that are driven by a leader with a larger than life personality, and they need to find something to sell. So that's where the most of the overlap comes in my experience.
Mhm. Why do you think there is such little scrutiny of these scams in mainstream media? Let's talk mainstream media in general and then specifically black media after that.
I think one, it's hard. There's a lot of research I do when I'm coming at these people, and not that the mainstream media doesn't do things that are hard. They have full investigations into large scams and whatnot, but there's a lot of lobbying. There's a lot of hidden power behind the scenes that a lot of these organizations have. Like MLMs, as an example, they have a whole lobbying arm, a whole lobbying group that makes sure that their industry stays legal. And in the case of street level scammers, they eventually get caught. There's eventually a lawsuit, there's eventually a class action that can take them down in some cases. But I think more than anything, it's because we're not convinced that a lot of them are even scams.
Mm,
The leaders do a really good job of communicating the so-called benefits, the so-called success of the people at the top of their company or organization, and that throws off the scent of the fact that, statistically, everybody at the bottom and even people in the middle are struggling to even tread water in MLMs and regular scams that aren't MLMs and Ponzi's and societal scams and like payday loans and things like that. I talked about in my second ever episode.
mhm,
There's just so many forms of these scams, and people are able to be convinced, whether in the government or otherwise, that okay, there's a legit aspect to this scam, therefore it's not that bad. I can move on and focus on the actual kind of violent crime or worse financial crimes that target Fortune 500 corporations. And I think we forget that the lower level scams are the ones causing the most damage to everyday people.
mhm,
And maybe we don't forget. Maybe they don't care. I'm not them, so I wouldn't know. But that's the mainstream take on it. And YouTube, I think, again, it's hard. I'll go back to it being difficult. Most YouTubers don't want to do research, quite frankly. I do a lot for everything I produce, and I cite my sources, which is something I also saw a void in on YouTube, is people listing where they got their information, making sure their information is fact checked, and trying to be accurate, even when they're pinning somebody to the wall. So it's not easy to churn out content when you have to research and fact check and verify and talk to sources and things like that before putting out a piece. So I think that's a big aspect to it. And it's just probably not that profitable either to talk about such nuanced complex topics that aren't as easily digested. Some creators are doing it. I'm not the only one. I'm never going to act like I am. There's plenty of creators that are trying to take that on, but at scale, no, that's not going to get you a lot of motion on YouTube unless you have, the skill to make it entertaining. And at times I succeed at that, hopefully.
There are a lot of people who I think are doing good work. FD Signifier, Olay, Lil Bill, the folks at Black Liberation Media like Jerry Ball and all of them. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah. They're killing it. They're killing it. I've collaborated with a couple of the ones you've named, a few of
Yep,
the ones and they're doing excellent work.
yep. I'm not convinced actually that all of this is not deliberate, like especially in like the mainstream corporate media.
Mm-hmm.
I'm older than you. I'm probably one generation up on you.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was a kid, there was a strong, very strong presence of consumer advocacy in popular media. In
Yeah.
newspapers and TV, all news programs,
Yeah.
national and
60
local.
minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all of that stuff used to be there. And that virtually disappeared after the 90s.
Mm.
And I think that's been a corporate push. Anything that would critique corporations in that way and hold them accountable has been gradually moved from public life and public discourse.
You're not wrong. I called out even how the government attacked, NPR and
Mm-hmm.
these
Mm-hmm.
organizations that are PBS that are helping to serve us documentaries and shows that expose things like that. That's not random. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? They're targeting these people because they help shine a light on the worst aspects of scams in our society. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
I also think about like Ralph Nader, who came
Hmm.
to prominence in 1965 with his book Unsafe at Any Speed, which is targeting the
Hmm.
automobile industry. He was a household name, you
Yep.
know. He even ran for president a generation later.
Hmm.
There is no comparable mainstream voice that's doing that kind of work these days. Mainstream, I would say.
I would agree. I think maybe Bernie Sanders has approached some of that.
Yeah, yeah.
But beyond him, because I mean he's an independent now, so beyond him, yeah, I don't see much of that work being done on any kind of large scale.
So we talked about mainstream media a bit. I want to talk more about black media.
Yeah.
Have you been invited to speak in any of these sort of mainstream black platforms?
You mean like large podcasts, stuff like that?
Podcast shows, anything like that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I've gotten an invite or two. I've turned down a decent amount of large scale invites I've gotten because I don't see how it serves my mission on
Mm,
YouTube. Like I'm not here to get more clout or to go back and forth with people. I'm not here to debate anybody.
mm,
I don't see it as productive. I think our obsession with people shouting at each other into microphones is one of the biggest detriments to our education process online. And I think it's more drama than substance. So I don't really go out for a lot of the things people want me to participate in because they don't get that. No, I didn't just make that one-off video that was educational and move on, and it just happened to do well. I made a bunch of videos that are educational that hardly anybody watched, but I'm not going to stop. Like it's just I'm not making these videos just to rack the numbers up and only do what succeeds. And no, I'm going to keep doing every topic that I find interesting. And, I'm going to make sure that my entire YouTube presence is financially viable. But at the same time, it's more than money. And they're only obsessed with what draws views and what draws conversation. And we're not on the same page.
Now we get to the segment of questions that I ask every guest.
Hmm.
First one. What songs got people on the dance floor when you were going out dancing at your peak?
uh, that would be probably college through early 20s. I didn't really club that much. I'm not a big club person, but I do like dance parties specifically. And for me, it would have to be, throwbacks. It's 90s jams, but it's also, I came up in the tall T era.
Mm.
So it's a lot of, the crank that joints.
Oh, yeah,
And yeah, like
yeah.
I was the dancer. Like I did all of them. I knew all the crank that joints.
Yeah.
I knew all like that to the stanky leg, the crank that yank, like I knew all that stuff. And I would say it was a combination of those and just classic '90s R&B joints that really got me dancing in my time.
Yeah, it's funny. As I said, I'm older than you, right? So
Hmm.
when the dance stuff came out, all that, the crank that and all that, I was like, oh man, that's kiddie
Of
stuff, right?
course, of
But
course,
now, as I look back, man, that was really good.
we
So
were
I was
dancing
tripping.
like we were actually dancing. It's way better
Yeah,
than what they got going on now with the
yeah,
TikTok stuff. So
yeah.
yeah.
What is a black cultural work in any genre, in any medium, that you think is a classic but is underappreciated?
I've talked about this recently. It's called Black AF History by Michael Harriot.
Yeah,
The book, and it is incredible. It tells the story of the unwhitewashed history of America. And just quite frankly, it taught me a lot of things that I don't think I would have gotten anywhere else. I don't know why I wasn't taught this stuff. I looked up some of it after reading, and it's just mind blowing the extent to which we've been lied to about how this country was founded, what everything in this country means, what the names mean, where it comes from, the natives, the fact that there were so many other tribes involved that we never learned the names of. There's just so many aspects to it that I was just never, I was never taught, even in like college African American histories classes, or history studies classes. So, yeah, I highly recommend Black AF History by Michael Harriot to anybody who's listening to pick up and read, because it's also funny. Like it's not just a history book; like it's entertaining, but it also teaches you a lot.
yeah. What particular dish did your family make that you looked forward to the most?
My dad specializes in dessert, banana pudding.
Mm,
It's old school, like bananas and wafers and custard, and it's like it's the bomb. I just had it recently.
yeah. Unfortunately, my wife doesn't like bananas, so we don't eat it that often. But I make a
Yeah,
good
no,
one.
no, my girlfriend doesn't like bananas either,
Yeah,
unless they're like the perfect amount of ripe. So like, yeah, it's I feel your pain.
yeah. Well, Cam James, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciated this conversation. Where can folks find you?
You can find me on YouTube, and that's it. Cam James. Ian, I appreciate you having me. Appreciate the time.
And I want to give you one more set of flowers. You're doing great work. I really appreciate what you're doing. Again, it takes a lot of work to do what you do. You're not doing it just for the clicks or for the money. You really believe in the mission. And I see a lot of big things for you in the future.
Thank you. That means a lot. I really appreciate it. I'm literally working on a video, as we speak, to kind of commemorate the 2 year anniversary of me starting, which was on the 18th in 2023 of December. So I appreciate you making the time, and Godspeed to you as well.
All right. Take care.
You too.
I want to thank my guest, Cam James, for joining me. You can find him online. Just Google Cam James. He's most prominent on YouTube. One lesson I learned from this discussion is that as much as I don't really like it, things that have nothing really to do with core substance or the ideas, like the presentation, the way it's presented, the way it looks, that matters. We talked a lot about Cam's high production values, and that being a huge reason why his message has been able to stand out and spread amongst all the YouTube clutter. Another thing is that the broader values of a society seep into the individual aspects of every community. In our case, we were talking about the scammer ethos that is permeated down to street level scams, and I sincerely believe that that's the case. I hope you enjoyed this episode. As always, please like, subscribe, rate, and review. That really helps the algorithm push the show to the top and make it more visible. And visit the website blacketcpod.com. Until next time.